Hi, I'm Jessica Dorsey, Executive Director of the Kansas Volunteer Commission, and I'm excited to be here with America Patton, who is an AmeriCorps alum. Thanks for joining us today, America.
Glad that I could join you this afternoon.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit about your AmeriCorps service?
Yes, absolutely. I started out as a Kansas AmeriCorps alum from 2015, and I did my service from 2015 to 2016. And the branch of AmeriCorps that I served in was called the Kansas City Youth Volunteer Corps of Greater Kansas City. And the director of the organization, his name is David Batty, and he was the founder of the Youth Volunteer Corps here in Kansas City. The branch of AmeriCorps that I was associated with was service learning. So my main roles were primarily working alongside teachers and getting inside of schools, whether it would be elementary, middle school, or high school. And I would work alongside teachers to incorporate service learning into the curriculum. We would prep kids for service learning projects. And when we felt confident enough that the kids were ready to go out in the community and serve, we would then go to diverse organizations, and then we would serve it in a community.
That sounds fantastic. We love the Youth Volunteer Corps over here at the Volunteer Commission. Thanks for your service. Can you tell us a little bit about how that service led to the career that you have now?
Absolutely. For me, AmeriCorps was transformational for me. It's something that I felt like I wish I could have had that experience a little bit earlier in my life. But unfortunately, I served a little bit later. I came out of the classroom as a substitute teacher, and I worked primarily as a long-term sub in different school districts. And when I got connected with AmeriCorps, it was almost like a liberating experience for me. It was like the four walls of the classroom were being broken down. And it was my opportunity for me to really spread my wings, so to speak. And it was an opportunity for me to get an opportunity to get engaged in the community on a deeper capacity level. Because previously, inside the classroom, when I was prepping lessons and working with kids and coaching, I didn't have the opportunity to really connect with the community. It was something that was inside of my heart that I really felt passionate about, but I didn't know exactly how I should go about that. And AmeriCorps and Youth Volunteer Corps had a blueprint on how to really connect with organizations and how to build relationships with these diverse organizations and how to reach out to diverse school districts. And for me, it really helped me remove some of my stereotypes that I had about particular places or different organizations, because I had an opportunity to go to various communities, both urban and rural. I had never went to many of these places before, and I got an opportunity to connect with these students during these service learning projects. And I would host weekly service learning projects on Saturdays throughout my AmeriCorps term. And I also was in several schools throughout the week. And a trend that I would notice when I was developing these service learning projects is that kids would come from all over, small town, large town, big city, small school, or large school. And for me, I would ask questions to the kids. I said, where'd you come from? Some kids from an hour, 2 hours away, and their parents would drop them off at these service learning projects. And it was consistent across the board that these kids, when they came to serve and learn, it was an opportunity for them to learn in an authentic and meaningful and relevant way. And it broke down the four walls of the classroom. And it broke down those dividers that sometimes divide us as societies and as communities, as schools, because the curriculum itself is great, but if kids don't never get that opportunity to go out in the community and connect with kids from diverse school districts, and if they don't get that opportunity to really build relationships with kids beyond playing sports or maybe an academic competition or going to a different school district to compete, I feel that we only have scratched the surface. But with the service learning piece, I think that it breaks down the wall. It breaks down the racial barriers, the stereotypes. It breaks down all of those things that sometimes it's hard to do within the four walls of the school. I like service learning because it taps into a higher level of thinking for the learner. It really gets to the heart of the students. It really allows students to be free, and it actually liberates them. It helps them to make more connections throughout their academic journey, because whenever I will go and speak to teachers or present on service learning and try to get teachers on board with this, a lot of them would have questions about, where do I start? And how do I assess the learner? And I think that if we incorporate service learning more into the curriculum, and we start to really let teachers know that it's not an add-on, it's not something that's going to lower the bar for students, but it's going to actually enhance the learning experience for the child, then I think that will make significant progress in terms of students' academic growth, and also in terms of some of the stereotypical things that are still plaguing our society, such as, like, racism and redlining, and you have gerrymandering, and you have all of those different things that are still in our communities. And if at some point inside all of us, there's a desire to get involved, and I think that everyone has a desire to get involved in some way, and that's what service does. It allows the learner and the teacher to both see themselves from a different perspective. It allows them to see themselves as an active participant, rather than them becoming a high performing student and prepping them to get a very high score, which I believe all those are important. But I feel that if the service learning piece is missing, I feel that we have done many students a disservice. And I remember during my AmeriCorps term, during our summer of service, we were serving together at a nonprofit agency, and I got an opportunity to meet a gentleman from who went to Harvard, and he told me that he got a real good education, but he said that he didn't get that piece of service when he was there. And I always know, we know Harvard is an elite school, but I think that many kids slide through the cracks because they miss that service learning piece. And this is just my motto. I've been saying this for a long time. I believe that service learning is one of the last freedom frontiers in education, which is just one of my perspectives. And I feel that if we really embrace service learning, and if we really can get teachers on board and diverse school districts on board, we can increase the percentage level of our service leaders and get kids to really see how empowering, how liberating this would be. Not only would my local community win, but we'll have all communities winning throughout this country, and then we'll have communities winning throughout the globe. And as a result, I think that our economy would be more sustainable. I think that our communities would be more interconnected, and then we would have a more inclusive world for all people. Now, when people go to a new community, they would feel included, and I think that's what service learning does. It's a real authentic way to let a person really feel connected to a community, even if they don't even live there. But if they get involved in that particular community, their culture and that particular community will forever have an imprint in their heart, because now they were able to adapt into a more holistic person through service learning.
That's fantastic. I love your passion for service learning. We'll definitely be calling on you when we're looking to talk about service learning with our educators across the state. So thanks so much for sharing about that. The other thing that I really wanted to hear about was this passion project that you had worked on around the African American Legacy Tour. I'm going to pull it up on the website. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a continuation of Emancipation Day of Service, and I got connected with the Freedom Frontiers Heritage Organization, which is a nonprofit organization which works on both Kansas and the Missouri side. And one of the goals of the Freedom Frontiers Heritage Organization is to help to preserve and sustain historical sites and landmarks throughout Kansas and Missouri, and also in other places. And last year I led a project called Emancipation Day of Service at the historic Underground Railroad site, which was right outside of a historic urban community that helped liberate many African American slaves. And the picture that you guys are looking at on Quindaro Park, that was a place where many slaves came to freedom at. And there was a lady by her last name was a Sorter, and she used to house slaves. She lived very close to that particular area, and many slaves came to her home to literally escape slavery right across the border. In that particular area, known as Quindaro Underground Railroad Commemorative Landmark Site, that's where I hosted an event called Emancipation Day of Service. And we commemorated the 158th year since Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And the way that we highlighted that is we focus on serving and learning. From my perspective, I think that one of the best ways to preserve freedom and our liberties is through service and learning. So we helped to restore Bishop Vernon's Garden, which is outside of the Vernon Multipurpose Center, which is also on our Freedom Trail there. The name is actually named after him. He was a famous professor. He was a college president. He was a president, he was the principal of Vernon Elementary School, which was used to be called the Negroes Colored School. And he was also a statesman. He was one of the first African American treasurers of the United States. And he grew up right behind that school there, and his home is there. So we restored a water garden on the outside of what was formerly known as Western University. And Western University was a historically Black university that was known for educating many African Americans after the Civil War. And now that particular site where we host Emancipation Day of Service is a commemorative landmark. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm working to engage diverse school districts and teachers and leaders from across the state and across and also in Missouri, and helping them to embrace service learning in hopes of getting them to come to the site to help to preserve this historical landmark for future generations. And we also traveled to the old Quindaro Brewery, which is where a place where slaves hid at, and it is very close to Quindaro Park. And there are stories about how slaves hid in this underground tunnel there. And we laid a slave memorial wreath on the outside of the tunnel. And we also laid roses on the outside of the tunnel to represent, to pay our respects to all those who have lost their lives fighting for freedom and justice, and also during the journey to freedom. So this year we're having our second annual Emancipation Day of Service. And we hope to expand that even further into Juneteenth to highlight some of the accomplishments that all people have made throughout history. And the goal is to try to make that become more of to grow it each year so that more students can get involved, more families can come to this historic landmark site and look at some of these particular landmarks. So I was contacted through the Freedom Frontiers to do research on all of those sites that you see up there last summer. And they allowed for me to go and explore these particular sites and research them and to write about them so that people can learn about these African American sites throughout Wyandotte County that maybe a few people know about. And we wanted to make this accessible to students and also people throughout pretty much the state, and also maybe globally if people would like to learn about this. So several libraries have hosted it on their website for African American History Month, this legacy tour. The Kansas City Public Library hosted it on their site. We have the Bonner Springs Library and several other libraries and particular organizations were interested in this particular site when they saw it. But all these are historical landmarks. Julius Groves, who was on there, who was the potato king of the world, and his grave site is literally in Eversville, Kansas, which is outside of Wyandotte County. And he was a very influential, wealthy, prosperous African American, which was really not heard of during that time. And he successfully operated a potato farm where he employed people to where he shipped out potatoes around the world. And then we had the Northeast Junior High School, which was a junior high school, which was an amazing school for African Americans in the inner city of Kansas City. There was a notable educator who went there by the name of Leon Brady, who helped to educate many students who are now educators around the world. And there were many notable educators who were there. Gary Stevenson, who I highlighted, who was one of my mentors, who I know specifically, who taught there at that school, who was an amazing mathematician during his time. But this whole site just is kind of filled with a lot of different individuals. We have Charlie Parker on the site, who his house was right behind Sumner Academy High School, and his lot is still there. And I'm hoping to do service learning projects there in terms of preserving that site. I've been speaking to individuals who want to preserve that site, so when people can go on this tour, they can actually see particular landmarks there on his site rather than seeing an empty field space. He was a famous American jazz bebop saxophone player who transformed and liberated many jazz artists and people through the sound of his horn. You also have on that particular site the John Brown statue, which was housed on the outside of Western University campus. He was a guy who helped free many slaves. He also got them to freedom here in Kansas, who risked his own life, who stood up for slavery. He's seen an African-American boy being beaten when he was growing up, and that had stirred him to live his whole life pretty much liberating African-American slaves. He also had a farm up north in New York where he would teach slaves how to farm. I believe there's a John Brown University in Arkansas, but he just was a very courageous guy. And the students erected that statue. It was built and imported over here from overseas, and it used to sit a little bit further back on campus. So when students walked throughout the campus, they would be able to look up at the statue and say, as a kind of remembering what he did to risk his life during a period of our history that is not very exciting to look at, but he did free many slaves during his journey. So I thought that we should highlight him. And the students would say, these are stories that I interviewed students, and they said that, y'all think that Mr. Brown is kind of crazy, but in our mind, he's okay because he helped liberate us. So it was a way of really saying thank you for him for risking his life to free slaves, because during a time when he was transporting slaves to freedom, it was illegal to free slaves, and it was illegal to take them off of their plantation. So you could be prosecuted and be put into prison for doing that during that period, but he risked his own life to do that. We also have on that site some other cool historical individuals. If you go to the gravesite of Ida Brown, if you go to the,
I see a gravesite for Julius George.
So yeah, sorry, if you go to the, Western, I apologize, West Long Cemetery.
Okay.
And Ida Brown, if that particular individual, she was from Kansas, and we have a sample music clip of her. She was a famous blues singer, very influential. We highlighted her and her music on there. And if you click on there, you'll get a sample of some of her music that she did. She was very influential. And
that's fun.
And if you click on the one below that, Professor James Scott, who was a famous ragtime piano player, we have a sample of his music on there too. He was from Kansas City. Scott Joplin gets a lot of attention, but him and Scott Joplin were the elite ragtime players during that time. And there's a song in there, I believe, I called Kansas City Rag, that we highlighted him. And
Gear up for spring with your favorite brands.
Well, it wants to give us a commercial.
okay, yes. So it's a cool site. Browse at your own pace, at your own leisure. Take your time, do this journey, at your own pace. And then if you get opportunity, maybe drive to these sites, and hopefully one day I would love to host a freedom tour where we get all of the people together and we get our Freedom Legacy Tour bus together. And then we go and drive throughout these sites and we actually go and visit them. And then the final goal that I would like to do with this African American Freedom Trail is to develop service learning projects at these sites. I want to engage youth, students, and teachers and families to start on and enduring service learning projects at these sites. So the next phase is to build in a service learning component onto these particular sites so that people can experience all of those sites on there.
That's fantastic. America, I can't tell you how happy I am to hear about everything that you shared today and how thankful I am for your service and your passion for these areas. I'm from Bonner Springs, so I head that way often, and I'm really excited to explore this further and see these sites for myself as I drive around Wyandotte County. We're also really proud here at the Kansas Volunteer Commission of your alumni service and of this legacy tour, and we can't wait to highlight it for you on our website and on social media. So,
thank you so much, Jessica. AmeriCorps literally transformed my life. I can never go back to being the same. I say this all the time. AmeriCorps it's hard to describe it, but it literally transformed my life. The experiences that I got, the connections I made, and what it did for me as far as my service capacity and how it helped to awaken me to a whole new world of diverse leaders. I mean, I can go on and on about how amazing AmeriCorps is, and it is literally a transformational experience. I'm definitely, when my daughter Gracie gets a little bit old enough, she's 10 years old right now. I want her to have that experience of, serving the way that I did so that it can really impact her. And AmeriCorps is literally, it's phenomenal. And I can't wait to see the next phases that it's going to evolve into in the future.
Me too.
And thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much. Yes.
Thank you. I think this is the start of a beautiful partnership.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you. Bye, America.
Bye.